Hi everyone. So I must apologize first to the translators because I'm going to introduce a lot of new protocols and new acronyms. So usually it's very hard on the people who do the translation because they have to come up with this really creative way to translate these really hard acronyms into something meaningful. Today I'm going to present what is SS7 and how to attack it. Here, how many people did use SS7 before? Can you raise your hand? 1, 2, 3. Okay. Actually, 4. Okay, excellent. You could, all of you, maybe raise your hand, because each of the time you're going to use this kind of telephone in order to place a call, send an SMS, you're using SS7. And you're actually using it much more than you can think. You're using translations and addressing that directly talk to the phone system. So what is SS7? Basically, it's something that is here thanks to us. Hackers made it appear. How come? Maybe some of you used Blue Box here. I heard that Argentina was very famous, and Brazil was very famous, and then Colombia was very famous for this kind of blue boxing. Well, at that time, it created a big problem for the telecommunication companies because by injecting signaling inside the phone line, you could actually take control of the phone system. That means pretend to be a phone switch talking to another phone switch. And here we can see two famous guys who were building blue boxes. Well, the thing is, it became such a problem for the telco in terms of revenue loss, but also in lack of control, that they introduced a new system. The new system was taking apart the controlling and signaling part and the voice part. So it's like SIP. SIP, you have RTP on one side, and you have the SIP protocol in itself. And the SIP protocol in itself gives, I'm going to call this person, and with this kind of user agent, and then there's some media communication which goes on, which carries basically what we call voice. In telco, we call it trunk connections. Now, here is what is a SS7 network. So it uses acronyms and words we don't see so much into the IP world. So basically the heart of the network is really the HLR. So it's basically what is storing for each of you this phone number correspond to this SIM card and is available on that server. And that server could be, for example, a visitor location register. For me, for now, my HLR is in France. It's a Vodafone company HLR. And it's saying that I'm using Claro VLR, which is in Brazil. Then all of these talk to different components, such as SMSC, one thing which is well known for spoofing SMS and basically abusing this gateway in order to deliver free messages. Then you have an interface with the mobile switching centers, which actually know where each phone is located. Everything in there talk not with IP, but talk with SS7. And SS7 is not something that is very much like IP. It really uses dedicated links. So each time one HLR wants to talk with one mobile gateway, it's going to have one dedicated link. It's not like an Ethernet hub where you can connect any kind of basically host and then say, oh, I'm going to talk to that machine. So everything has to be usually physically connected, and then everything has to be configured to talk specifically from one computer to another computer. When I'm using computer, you must understand that some of these computers just barely fit in this room. So one time I was doing a pen test on SS7, and I asked the guy, oh, could I see the machines that basically I was able to get into? And they're like, oh, yeah, sure, no problem. So they take me to the data center, and then they show me, oh, this is the machine. And you have a rack and with a machine, and there's written on one of the machine, HLR. And I'm like, oh, wow, impressive. And I'm like, and what are the other machines? And they are, oh, no, the other machines are also the HLR. And it took like 2 lines of racks, and basically all these machines were only one component. So we're talking about really big equipment. And each of these equipment have to have at least one clone. So in one data center, you never have one kind of equipment. You always have for one kind of equipment 2 separated equipment. And each of them is going to be connected with its peer using a set of 2 lines all the time. So it's highly redundant. And the reason of this is that basically 1 minute of downtime for a telecom operator is worth millions of euro or real that goes nowhere. One thing that is important to understand is that each time you make a phone call, you will create something called CDR, charging data records. And these CDR are then massively accumulated, and at the end of the month, they basically say that creates that much money that you have to give to the company. So each time the company cannot create a CDR for whatever reason, it's losing money. Now, under the hood, the stack is basically ISO stack. So you can see the different layer. We see MTP1. MTP level 1 is really the physical layer. And then MTP2, MTP3 could be like ARP and TCP. And then you have higher layer, which are on top of it, which then start to be the funny thing. Basically, what you can do with this kind of stuff is, let's say, send by one packet, which says, this prepaid card now is credited with $1 million of communication. And this is one packet. So the kind of attack you can do is, for example, rerouting all phone numbers calling the police station to a pawn line. This is the kind of thing that takes also usually 1 or a few packets with SS7. And typically, we're talking about prehistoric protocols. So when we see here this protocol, for example, all these protocols up to SCTP, there are no sequence numbers. So you don't need to think about sequence number prediction or stuff like that. No needed. So you inject a packet, it's good. But the problem is how to inject a packet. Now, basically, each time you inject a packet, you're going to speak with the SS7 protocol format. So forget about IP, we talk about point codes. So in IP world, 32-bit, forget about it. Here it's 24-bit. And better than that, people don't agree on how to use it. So there's 2 main family of addressing, one by ITU, the other one by ANSI, and they are incompatible. ANSI says, well, basically I'm using a notation which is 8-bit, 8-bit, 8-bit. And ITU says, no, I'm addressing only on 14-bit, and I'm using 3-bit, 8-bit, 3-bit. And, no, 3-bit, 5-bit, 3-bit. So basically, the way you can read the same address is not going to translate in the same thing inside the packet. Then there's plenty of other weird things. For example, you're going to say this packet is related to that trunk carrying the voice. So basically, you can say this is pretty much alien. But actually, there are the same vulnerabilities. You can do injection of bad content. There are some format strings into some equipment. There are some scanning methodologies. And now we'll see basically what are the different scanning strategies that we can have and what are the different ways to attack the phone system and conduct real missions. So the toughest thing in the SS7 network is really how to get into it. What we have in here is a little list of the different entry points that you can have in the phone system. One of the easiest way to get into the phone system is very often to connect through the GPRS and to abuse the fact that the network are not really well segmented. So that's the kind of thing that you and I know very well. It's standard IP pen test. Then you end up on a machine which is connected to the SS7. Okay, then the problem starts. the interface of SS7 will not appear when you do ifconfig. It will be just a library that basically enable the software to talk with some hardware interface. So basically for you, you would have to know how to program this library and then to be able to inject some packets into SS7. This is typically attacking the network elements of the system. Now, what we have is many different network elements. For example, we have the value-added services, we have SMSCs, we have basically any kind of signaling gateway that will provide the phone services. But you have also some very interesting systems that are vulnerable. For example, on the few last lines, you can see legal interception gateways. So legal interception gateways are part of the SS7 network. It enables COP to basically call a phone number, give a PIN code, and then say, I want to have a copy of all SMSs going to that other phone number. And then they will receive on their own phone a copy of all SMSs that will go to their target and basically monitored phone. They can also get a copy of the phone calls. So basically what will happen is that on their phone, each time, for example, some drug dealer is receiving a call, their phone will ring and they will be able to hear the conversation, but actually not be able to speak into it. Now, maybe some of you are familiar with the SS7 affair called the Athens affair. Are some of you aware of this? A problem in Greece with national security? No? Okay. Yeah, one person. Basically, what happened is that during the period pre-Olympics and during the Olympics in Greece, something like 100 top officials of Greece government and affairs and business were illegally monitored with basically legal interception gateway. And the way it was done is that some people reprogrammed the interception mechanism in each of the switches to abuse the mechanism that the regular legal interception gateway was using. And what happened is that something like 10 phones got a copy of all these presidents of and ministries of different components of Greek government, and nobody found out about this until the day that a guy, the telecom director from this Greek telecom operator, committed suicide in his apartment. And then basically what happened is that people started to look into the switch and found this huge backdoor. In there, what is interesting is that as soon as you control the phone network from the signaling side and from the switches, basically you don't have much logs because we are speaking of really high number of communication and signaling. And the notion of log for telecom operator is mostly related to what I called earlier the CDR, so basically the charging records of the call you made. But basically there's very few logging of the actual packets that goes through. So once stuff is done at this level, you cannot do much about finding what happened when. Last week, France Telecom in France suffered an outage of 1 hour on their HLR. That means no service, no coverage for voice over the national territory of France for 1 hour. That was huge. That means huge revenue loss. Well, the problem is, at this level, we can't say too much if it came first from the SS7 level or from the system that hosts the HLR or different kind of parameter. It's really a system where Wireshark equivalent is something that costs around 1 million euro and is deployed in many places of the network. It's something very heavy, I would say. And when you go back to this LIG example in Greece, the only kind of thing they could find out about what happened is that only 10 prepaid telephones were used around the US Embassy, but they could not say it was linked with the US Embassy, and because basically they had no more information that the location of the phones and which people were tapped, nothing more. So once you're inside the network through one of these entry points, you're going to be able to inject some kind of what I called MSU, the message signaling unit, and some of them are quite interesting. We'll see a bit later. So one thing is, people have been making the, how to say, people in telecom industry have seen that IP world had a very interesting side of it. Like, it's cheaper, you don't need to make connection to each of the network elements. So basically what happened is that the telecom started to carry signaling over IP networks. And that is what we call SIGTRAN. SIGTRAN is work done by IETF, so basically the Internet specification body, and which enables to carry SS7 on top of basically TCP/IP. So for this, we're using SCTP, and prior to this conference, I've made some conferences about SCTP scan, which is a way to scan for the SCTP entry point. And this is where it starts to be interested, because this is something you can quite easily find into a telecom operator network. Now, SCTP enables you to carry over IP this kind of traffic, and it's really protocol which is a bit weird. How many of you have been using SCTP in there? Nobody? Okay. The thing is, it's a bit like TCP, but it enables, for example, weird things such as connect from that many addresses to that many addresses. So you can connect from multiple interfaces on your local machine to multiple interfaces on different remote machines. And for that, you basically need to make an association, which is a four-way handshake. So it's like having the TCP SYN and then SYNAC, but here it's init. And then having a cookie, which is something that prevents denial of service, and have a very long, like a very long space for randomness. So it's very hard to predict. So basically, you understand now why the Linux kernel had a vulnerability into SCTP, a remote vulnerability into the SCTP stack, because not only for each packet you have basically a lot of different fields, but you can have chunks inside each packet. And inside each packet, different chunks mean different kind of ordering of parameters, and then you have in each of these packets basically what you get into any kind of protocol, which is a source and destination. So SCTP scan is something you can use from Backtrack, it's included into it, and it uses a lot of tricks in order to map the phone system. As I told you earlier, when you connect from one machine to another machine in SS7 using SIGTRAN, you're going to be using clearly defined peers. And you need to map the entry point, which are the open points, which enable this peer to communicate. So there's many protection for basically for TCP, firewalls, stuff like that. The main protection for SCTP, SIGTRAN, and SS7 is much more configuration. We'll see a bit later why this creates vulnerabilities. But if you're not configured, you're not supposed to be able to connect to the remote machine. So basically, when we are doing any kind of scan using SCTP, we should have this behavior. Sending init, not getting anything, and then sending init and getting init hack means that the port is open. But the problem is that we get a lot of issues where retransmit. We don't know if the packet was lost or if the port is not open. Thanks to the people who implement this stack, we get a help from the remote stack, which say, oh, about what you're doing, I don't have any port open. So we can do stealth scan without completing the four-way handshake and still map very quickly and very accurately which are the entry points on the network. Here, it's fast, it's positive, it's like TCP SYNSCAN. So you can try it at home. One thing that is quite interesting is that when I started to work on this scanner, it was 2001, 2002, I started to maybe scan the internet in order to know which were the open ports which used the SCTP. And I scan and scan and scan. And basically, there's very few open ports with SCTP on the internet. It's IP protocol 0x82, so it's routed, there's no problem. It does not like too much being natted, because a NAT on this is going to be very tricky. But you can perfectly scan the internet. And basically, I was scanning and scanning, and I wondered, will I appear in dshield.org? And I scanned for 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. And at Black Hat Europe, I said, okay, I've been scanning the internet for that many years without appearing once into dshield.org. And then I start to see a guy with a Sans t-shirt starting to write furiously on his notebook something like, fix the problem with your, basically, firewall log processor. So that's something, and I'm not saying that to the people who program backdoors or remote administration kits or rootkit, but this is something that is really stealth on the network. Nobody cares too much about SCTP. It's like a known protocol, and I don't care. So now, the interesting thing is that here we were talking about only the tube. Now the interesting thing is going to be what can we inject on top of this network. And we're going to use user adaptation layer. So if we want to, I love ASCII art, but I don't know about you. Here is a better presentation. So on the right side, you can see the traditional SS7 stack. And on the middle, you can see typically what is a STP, which is the interface to the SS7 world. And this STP, or signaling gateway here, is going to bridge between pure SS7, which requires dedicated links. So we are talking about T1 link, which carries SS7, and IP world, which then will carry on top of SCTP some kind of adaptation layer that will provide the same service as the MTP3 provided before. And then, using SCTP, it's going to be carried using multiple links. So you have many user adaptation layer, and here I'm going to only speak about M3UA, which carries MTP3 and behaves as MTP3 on the network. So you can directly put on top of this protocol SCCP messages. One thing that is interesting is that, as I said, everything has to be done through configuration. So let's say that a legitimate peer, which is, for example, the home location register, which holds your phone number, on the network wants to connect to the STP, which is the router, well, then it will send init and get init ACK and then do a complete peering. What we have next is that an attacker will send init packet to some ports and try to scan them, and then try to send init packets to other ports. And for example, if this port is open, but the guy is not configured, then you cannot receive packet. So you can start to do negative scanning, and negative scanning can tell you by not receiving any answer from a stack that usually sends you a port, that the port is open, but you're not configured to connect to it. So let's say that on this side, it's not that easy to get into the network. Well, we have many helps anyway. So one thing is, when you're auditing the SS7 network, what you want to do is to audit all the perimeters. And there's many perimeters to phone network. For example, the first perimeter is really your phone network. So your phone, your radio access to the phone network. And here, the one that we are most interested in will be the STP, which connect to different, let's say, clouds. One cloud is, of course, the international cloud. That means that through one peer, one SS7 peer, you're going to be connected to the rest of all the telecom operators. So the telecom either have two choices. One choice is they do deal with each individual telecom operator and create connection to each of them. This is something that is very expensive. Another way is to use interconnection providers. So typically they use interconnection provider which have one link with them and then many links with all of the rest of the operators. And each time you have a new connection with a new operator, you must have tariff tables that define how much you will be billing for each of the calls. And one other perimeter is the national interconnection with your national operators. So each of these will give different exposure to the SS7 network. One thing that is funny is that, of course, as I said in the beginning, you can get to the corporate network and then jump into the SS7 network, or you can also try to get in through the Femto Cell. So I don't know, is Femto Cell deployed in Brazil? No? Yeah? It's going to be deployed. Okay, so what operators didn't see is that the Femto Cell give access to a subcategory of the protocol of SS7. So it's a huge entry point, and that can give a tremendous level of access to someone controlling the individual Femto cell that is given to the user. We'll talk about that later. So one thing that is quite important here is to see that the STP is being used as a firewall for any kind of traffic that will come from other operators. And the STP is doing some kind of NAT, which is called Global Title Translation. When you do this type of NAT, it says that this kind of phone number, when it is received, must go to that set of SS7 equipment. And we translate basically phone numbers into point codes, the destination point codes I was talking in the beginning. So depending on which network it's coming from, and there's a field which is NI, network indicator, which indicates this, and which phone number or DPC you're targeting, then you're going to be able to see a different kind of services that you will be able to reach. This list of signaling point code is like doing the footprint scanning in the beginning of a pen test. You have a different kind of connection. Let's say I connect through the national telecom operator, and then I will start to do like the Nmap, trying to find all the different destination point code that are valid on the network. And basically, here, this GTT global title translation or this SCTP routing is not proper firewalling. What happens in there is that it's just translating addresses. But as you know, you could protect a network by saying, oh, you can't access this particular machine because you don't have a route to it. But that's weak, because if I send directly my IP packet with the proper ARP address of the remote machine, then it will receive it and will answer to me. So basically it's the same in SS7. And by doing scanning per perimeter and by doing injection of messages, you're able to see on remote system that they receive SS7 message but don't know how to send them back. Well, the sad news is, since a lot of SS7 messages don't use any kind of acknowledgement or any kind of sequence numbers, you can pretty much inject blind traffic and then don't expect any answer, but still do operation on the SS7 network. So this is a kind of attack that is basically similar to what we see in TCP/IP networks, but then what we have working into the network. So, as I see, I don't have much time. It's a very big subject, so I'll skip very quickly now to practical attacks that we can do. There's some attacks which comes from the fact that different stack, the SS7 stack and the SIGTRAN stack, were done by different people, by example, ITU and IETF, and with different goals and different ID of what was the network. So for the ITU, the SS7 network was very much closed. For the IETF, the SS7 network was like just any IP network. It's limited to the people who have access to basically sending packets into it. And what happens is that if you look at SCTP, the subsystem scanning is something that you can do, but it's okay because it's very hard to know which subsystem is living on which point code, on which destination address. Now with M3UA, the IETF guys said, oh, that should be cool if we could try to find a way to test if one destination was valid. So if you combine the two, what you can see is you can detect the list of target SS7 equipment, the network elements, with their destination point code, and then each of the subsystems that live on this particular machine. That means that you can have pretty much the same attack pattern that we have on IP networks. And basically we are taking advantage here of the finite state machine, also that's coming directly from the RFC, where you have different states which you emerge into, and basically starting the relationship with any kind of SIGTRAN peer, you're going to be able to inject at certain moment some traffic which will enable you to get the answers and say, okay, I enumerated the hosts and then I enumerate the subsystem which live on these hosts. So first M3UA test, and then we move one layer up. We start to scan with SCTP's test, which are the application which are running on top of it. And then start to do real attacks, for example, MAP, which is mobility, the mobile part of the protocol, which will enable us to do some tests. So basically what we have is, it's a bit like the same strategy. We do port scan, and then we enumerate the hosts. We do SCTP port scan, which is the entry point, then enumerate the hosts, then enumerate the application. Okay, so I'm going to go very quickly on this. What we have here is a standard call flow for making a call on the phone network. So you're sending IAM packet which says, I want to call someone, then the phone rings, and then it beeps into your phone to say that the phone is ringing, and then the connection is done, and on a separate circuit, the voice is going through. Now, what happens is that if you send many IAM message, what you do is you're provisioning voice trunks on the phone switches. So if you send massively these IAM, the switches will start to say, oh, this line is taken, this line is taken, and at each time it will be provisioned so that another call, this call can be completed. So here we can do very quickly some capacity DOS. And since we are using SIGTRAN connection, we can inject a lot of packets. So we can very quickly fill up the trunk. Okay, then there's a release part of it, where we can very easily send release packet and target one particular connection and one particular circuit identification. That means that you can either, by shooting blindly disconnect people, or you can selectively say, I want to disconnect this person or this person. One thing that is also available when you go up the layers is use map. When you want to send an SMS, you're first sending a message which is send routing information to the home location register which owns this person. So for me, each time you're going to send me an SMS, your network is going to query my HLR in France, the Vodafone HLR, and the Vodafone HLR is going to say, no, really, don't talk to me, you'd better talk to this VLR, so it's the Visitor Location Register, which is right now in Claro, in Brazil. And then it says, basically, the response to this SRI send routing information is, talk to that gateway which currently is Philippe is connected with. Well, some people start to monetize their SS7 access in order to, for example, provide useful services, send SMSs for cheap, be able to do connection between the phone network and VoIP provider, well, all this stuff. And then people wanted to make commercial use of it. So one commercial use of it is SMS advertisement. And some people didn't have the phone number, so they wanted to basically try to enumerate all the phone number. And to do that, some people started to send offer on the internet. Well, let's say that I offer you a way to enumerate all the phone numbers that are active basically on the SS7 network. Basically, doing 10,000 lookups for this number enumeration costs 150 euro. So that's something like $200 or something. And within this request, what you get is the prefix of the gateway, the mobile gateway, that is taking care of you. For example, in Sao Paulo, there are, let's say, 10 to 20 mobile gateways per provider. Basically, you can count one mobile gateway per 500,000 users. And each mobile gateway is taking care of one side, one region of, let's say, Sao Paulo. So by doing a preliminary scan, like coming to different countries and seeing which MSC is taking care of what location, you can, with 150 euro of budget, locate anyone by his phone number anywhere on Earth. And the address that are used by these MSC are just plain phone numbers. So even if you don't know what is the location of that MSC, at least you can know which is the country that the person is right now. And if someone is telling you, oh yeah, I'm away, I'm in a different country, and basically, well, you don't believe the person, you can do a lookup and say that the guy is actually in Brazil. So definitely that's the kind of things that you can pretty much do. Okay, other practical attack are update location. So basically it's the same. I spoof a packet. I say that the location of my phone is not anymore in Brazil, but is in Kazakhstan. Basically, my HLR will happily redirect all communication to Kazakhstan. If I'm not in Kazakhstan, I don't receive any message up till I reboot my phone. So Rodrigo is here. It means that I don't have many more time, right? 5 minutes? Yep. Okay. Cool. Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, one thing that is important here is the Femto Cell perimeter. So Femto Cell is basically a Linux box that is connected to the phone network and enable you in your home to have 3G coverage with excellent quality. The thing is, it's using an IPsec tunnel back into the operator network in order to connect to one, the trunk part, which is the voice part, and two, to the signaling network. This IPsec tunnel would be a good idea if the box was secure. Tough luck. Usually, these boxes are definitely not secure. It's basically Monta Vista Linux with standard vulnerabilities on them, unpatched. Of course, there's no automatic patching on these machines. So basically, if a new vulnerability goes on, well, you have to depend on the operator updating the machine. And what you can have, yeah.
Does it have a remote HTTP interface?
No. And usually it's filtered, so it displays some services such as SSH, but you can't connect to it. It's only through the tunnels that you can connect to it. Basically, when you scan it, there's nothing on it. But the problem is that, well, it has vulnerabilities, it has JTAG port exported or visible, not without the fuse being blown, and basically what it boils down to is that you get into the box, abuse the IPsec tunnel, and start to inject SIGTRAN messages with one of the dialect of SIGTRAN of SS7 into it. So it uses HNBAP, which is the kind of protocol that is used by 3G networks. But what you have is a start of a control of the SS7 network here. You can also inject SS7 through SIP, because some people said, oh, we have two parts of the SS7 network and it's way cheaper to use IP interconnection between the two. And the guy said, yeah, let's connect that through two asterisk. It's not asterisk, definitely, but through two SIP compatible devices. And the problem is you're losing information. You're losing a lot of information about which DPC, which OPC it is relating, which trunk voice it's relating to, in which NI, which network, is it national, international, internal to the company. So it had to transport this data. And some guy said, oh, brilliant guy. He said, oh, well, that's like MIME encapsulation. Let's just put the SS7 information into an attachment to the SIP message. It works. It's called SIP-T, and basically enable you to inject SS7 into SIP basically signaling to gateways which understand it. So here, if you don't have filtering, you're able to inject all the message that I was talking about earlier. So how to get secure? Well, the thing is, there's manual audit, but as I explained a bit earlier, depending on all the perspective from the different NIs, the different network indicator you're talking about, all the different possibilities of the different destination point codes, then trying all the different subsystems, and you have to have each time a different configuration for all of these because it's configured on the side of the telco. It's really a difficult process. So you can automate it. That's what we did in P1Sec. And basically the thing is, here it's like running, let's say, Nessus or Qualys or any kind of network scanner, where you have some things that will connect to different entry points that were defined. One entry point, for example, as internal element, one entry point as external national telco, one entry point as, for example, international trunk. And based on this, it will give different perspective to your network. Also, one thing that is very important in order to get good security is to do customer acceptance testing. That means that before purchasing some product, part of the negotiation with the equipment vendor, it has to have a process of verifying the security. It's part of the QA process. Andrew knows about integration of security in life cycles. That's the same thing. It has to come into a telecom company's habits. Now there's many development, open source, you can find that on the website, stuff to basically deal a bit. There's open source tools that you can start to use. And basically what we can say is that now the SS7 network is getting more and more open. It's not really a problem, but it's a matter of maturity. When telecom start addressing it, they do pretty much a good job. The tools are there, so basically let's go for it. Now it's more the awareness that needs to be improved. Lots of people have been working on this. I must thank all these people and many more. And thank you to the organization, which was great. I really enjoyed being here. So thank you very much. And